My name is Tamanda Mukawa, and I am giving a summary of the fourth day of the revival, which was on Wednesday, and the title was Remember the Plot. So we started with a discussion that was reminding us of the statement remember. When someone has explained things to you, whenever they say remember, it's giving you a picture that you have to at least grab this important part out of everything that has been explained. So we were seeing that in the Bible, we are taught to remember the Sabbath on Exodus chapter 20. We are taught to remember Lot's wife. That is, you can find it in Luke chapter 17. And we were taught to remember the law of Moses in Malachi chapter 4. And lastly, we were taught to remember the words of Jesus in Acts chapter 26. So one other thing that we're taught to remember is the plot of Balaam, or remember the plot that King Balak and Balaam devised against the children of Israel. So the theme text was coming from Micah chapter 6 verse 5, which says, "O my people, remember now what King Balak, king of Moab, consulted, and what Balaam, the son of Beor, answered him, from Shittim to Gilgal, that you may know the righteousness of the Lord." So we see that there is repetition of this story, the story of Balak and Balaam. It's repeated in Nehemiah chapter 13. In Numbers chapter 22, you'll find that story. In Joshua chapter 13, you'll find it on Micah 6, the verse that I've just said. You'll find it on Peter chapter 2, on 2 Peter chapter 2, and Jude chapter 11, and of course in Revelation chapter 2, you'll find that a mention of Balaam is there. So the repetition should give us that mind to question and see the lessons that we can learn from this plot. So the story mostly was being covered from Numbers chapter 22, chapter 23, chapter 24 and 25, and the quotations were mostly taken from patriarchs and prophets, especially chapter 40, which is the chapter titled Balaam. There are 6 things that we can take out of this lesson that we learned, remember the plot. These 6 are: the first encounter of King Balak and Balaam, the second encounter, the third thing is the beaten donkey, the fourth we have Balaam's diabolical plan against the children of Israel, the fifth we have a lesson about women, and the 6th and last lesson we can take out from this is God's honor. So in short, let me just go through these 6 points that I've mentioned. On the first encounter, we find it in Numbers chapter 22, verse 1 to 14, where we see that Balaam knew the protocol to consult God about whatever was presented to him. And he knew that God has said no to the request of King Balak. But then he was so hesitant to send these people back. So the lessons we are getting is that God is not someone to trifle with. Now the children of Israel have entered the land of Moab, and the king of Moab, King Balak, is so afraid, and then he knows what God, the God of Israel, has done for these children, for these people, from the time they were coming out of Egypt and their whole journey through the desert, and the people who they encountered on the way. So Balak definitely knows that his country will easily be taken away from him. Then he sends people to go and consult the prophet Balaam, and says that you curse the children of Israel. We see the first encounter that Balaam follows protocol and knows that God cannot condone this, and he sends them back to say that God will not allow this to happen. I cannot curse the children of Israel. Then now we see the second encounter that Balaam the prophet has with these people of Moab, sent by King Balak, which he now has second thoughts. He really wants the rewards that are being granted to him once he has done the task of cursing these children. So he tries his best to go to God and consult further and see if he can curse these children. So we see that in the first encounter of King Balak and Balaam, and in the second encounter, we see lessons such as having God to actually answer all our prayers. That is not so. God cannot answer actually all of our prayers that we can present to him. And we see that God of the narrow way is not someone to be trifled with. Balaam knew exactly what God would say, that this will not go, but then he still persisted further. And then we see the beaten donkey, the lesson of the beaten donkey. Now Balaam is on his way to the king to discuss further about these issues of what he should do, the plot. So we see that the donkey is stopped by an angel holding a sword, and then Balaam isn't able to see the angel, and he beats the donkey. The donkey talks back to Balaam. And then we see, if we go further and read the text, we see the conversation that the donkey had with Balaam. And then in the end, the lessons that were drawn was that we should be kind to animals. As we were given dominion in the beginning, we have dominion over everything that God created. That implies to animals as well. And then we see Balaam's diabolical plan. Now Balaam knows that he cannot just curse the children of Israel just like that. Then he consults the king to say, if you want to really deal with these children, now bring them something to their entertainment, bring something to their eyes, to their pleasure, that they may turn away from God. So we see this diabolical plan being that the king should host a party, a function, should host this common social gathering, that there should be women, food, and whatsoever, and most especially there should be the worship of foreign gods. This Balaam knew very well that the children of Israel will easily be taken away from God's presence through these activities. That's the diabolical plan that we learned. And the other lesson we learned was about women. We were seeing women's role in this social gathering where they dress provocatively and whatsoever. The children of Israel were enticed to actually indulge in very bad practices. So the lessons that were drawn were that if the devil is to use women, he will use them to the extent that even the whole plan will be perfectly executed. Because women, if they are used, they will actually do a very good job. Not only will the devil use women to the fullest, God can also use women to do great works. We see examples of Ellen G. White and many other pioneers that were there, and even still maybe here now during our time. So that was a point that was also discussed about women. And then lastly, we see God's honor. So now, this rested mostly on what Phinehas did. Phinehas, will find his story there in Numbers, where he had to take a javelin and struck an Israelite who was in his tent with a Moabite woman. So he had to kill them. Then the lessons that were drawn from what Phinehas did is that Phinehas honored God through his action. And later on we saw that we should not be involved in false charity. Do not cover sin. Mention sin with its real name. Don't cover bad things that is happening or in the church or anywhere else. You need to be upright and show God's honor in everything that happens. So that was really what we learned on Wednesday on the title of Remember the Plot, the story of Balak and Balaam, how the children of Israel, instead of being cursed, were drawn away from God's presence and all the things that happened afterwards. Remember the plot. Thank you.